The first sound Joyce ever heard was the cry of another baby. Cold air bit at her tiny hands, wrapped only in a worn cloth, as she lay on the steps of an old orphanage in a quiet town in Ghana. No one knew who had left her there. No note, no name, just a baby swaddled in silence and left at the mercy of the world. The nuns took her in and named her Joyce, a name that they said meant hope. But hope was a complicated thing inside the stone walls of St. Mary's home. The orphanage was clean, the meals warm, and the prayers constant, but it was no substitute for a real home. Joyce learned that early, watching children come and go, waiting for someone to choose her. She waited for years. At 7, she watched her best friend Abina leave hand in hand with a couple who smelled like soap and wore smiles too white to be real. At 9, she grew quieter, shrinking into corners during visitor days, afraid that her silence was the reason no one ever looked her way. By 12, she stopped hoping altogether, except at night. Every night, she would lie awake in her tiny bed, surrounded by the soft snores of other children, and dream she'd imagine a mother brushing her hair, a father tucking her in, laughter echoing through a house that smelled of food and warmth and love. Maybe tomorrow, she would whisper to the cracked ceiling, maybe tomorrow they'll come. And then, one day, someone did. Joyce was 14 when Amos and Afua walked into the orphanage. They were different from the other couples. Amos had kind eyes and a gentle way of holding Afu's hand, as though he never wanted to let go. Afua was quiet but elegant, dressed in a soft blue dress with tiny white flowers stitched along the hem. They said they had been married 8 years and couldn't have children of their own. The children buzzed with excitement. They always did when potential parents visited. Joyce stayed in the background, pretending to tidy up toys that had long been organized. She had learned to keep her expectations buried deep, but her presence, even in hiding, didn't go unnoticed. "That girl," Afua said, her voice soft. "The one in the corner. What's her name?" The nun smiled. "That's Joyce. She's a good girl, very quiet, very responsible." Amos nodded, his eyes meeting Joyce's for a brief moment. He smiled, and for the first time in years, something flickered inside hers, something dangerously close to hope. The decision came quickly. "We'd like to adopt Joyce," Amos said later that afternoon. Joyce stood in stunned silence, her heart pounding like it wanted to fly out of her chest. She looked at the nun, then at the couple, unsure if she was hearing correctly. Afua smiled. "We want to give you a real home." That night, Joyce packed her few belongings into a paper bag and said goodbye to the only world she had known. She held Afua's hand tightly as they walked out the orphanage gate. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're safe now," Afua replied, squeezing her hand gently. "You're ours." For the first time, Joyce saw what a home could be. Their house wasn't large, but it was filled with warmth. Amos joked with her during dinner, and Afua taught her to cook jollof rice, just the way she liked it, spicy, with bits of fried chicken. They bought her new clothes, helped her with schoolwork, and even surprised her with a birthday cake, something she had never had before. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Joyce told Afua one night while drying dishes. Afua smiled, brushing a curl from Joyce's forehead. "Then let's never wake up." But dreams are fragile. Exactly a year later, everything changed. Afua came home one afternoon, glowing with joy. "Joyce," she said, gathering her in a hug, "I'm pregnant." Joyce clapped her hands, genuinely excited. "Really? That's amazing," Afua laughed. "You'll be a big sister." But something unspoken shifted that day. As Afua's belly grew, so did the distance. Joyce noticed it in small things. At first, the way Afua forgot to kiss her goodnight, how Amos no longer asked about her day. Their joy now had a center, and it wasn't her. When the baby boy arrived, the household transformed. Friends visited with gifts. Afua glowed with motherhood. Amos beamed with pride. Joyce smiled too, but her presence began to fade into the background. "He needs all our attention now," Afua explained when Joyce asked why her birthday was forgotten that year. Joyce nodded. "I understand," but she didn't. Over time, the warmth she once felt turned to obligation. The smiles were replaced with commands. "Joyce, clean the kitchen." "Joyce, the baby needs a bath." "Joyce, you're old enough to help more." She did everything they asked. She scrubbed floors, changed diapers, cooked meals, and yet no one said thank you anymore. She became invisible again. just like in the orphanage, but now inside a house that had once promised her love. One night, she overheard Afu whisper to Amos, "We can't afford to send her to school anymore. The baby needs so much. She should be grateful we took her in at all," Amos replied. The words shattered something in her. Joyce didn't cry. Not that night. Not ever again while living under that roof. Crying meant weakness, and she couldn't afford that anymore. On her 18th birthday, she sat on her thin mattress in the back room, the one they now called the maid's room. No cake, no greeting, just chores. That night, while everyone slept, Joyce quietly packed a small bag. No goodbyes, no goodbyes. No regrets, only resolve. She stepped into the night with nothing but a faded dress, worn-out shoes, and a dream she hadn't let die, to find a life where she could be free and, maybe, just maybe, finally loved. The road ahead was dark, the stars above barely visible, but as Joyce walked away from the only home she'd ever known, she didn't look back. She walked toward something better. Or so she hoped. The city didn't welcome Joyce with open arms. It was loud, crowded, and indifferent, like a machine that kept turning, whether you were part of it or not. She slept in alleyways and behind shops, curled up with her bag pressed to her chest. Days blurred into each other. Every morning, she'd rise with the sun, knock on doors, and ask, "Do you need help cleaning, cooking, anything?" Most of the time, doors slammed shut. After 2 weeks, the money she'd saved from odd jobs back in the small town was gone. Hunger gnawed at her ribs. She tightened her belt just to trick her stomach into silence. People glanced at her with pity or worse, as suspicion. Still, Joyce kept going. One afternoon, while sweeping the front of a market stall, just to earn a few coins, a voice called out from behind her. "My girl," the voice said, low and warm. "How long you been out here?" Joyce turned. A stout woman stood before her, wrapped in a faded but neatly tied kente cloth. Her eyes were sharp, but kind. "Almost a month," Joyce admitted. The woman frowned. "What's your name?" "Joyce." "Joyce, I'm Auntie Abba, and you're too young and too smart looking to be starving in the street." Joyce looked away, embarrassed. "I'll be fine." "No, you won't," Auntie Aba said bluntly. "You're coming with me." Auntie Aba lived in a modest one-room apartment above her small tailor shop. That first night, Joyce bathed, ate real food, and slept under a roof for the first time in weeks. "You can help me out here until we figure something better," Auntie Abba said, passing her a bowl of light soup. "But I might know someone who needs a live-in maid. Very rich, very picky, but stable." Joyce blinked. "Who?" "A man named Eric." The mansion sat on a hill, behind gates so tall Joyce had to tilt her head back just to see the top. The house was modern steel and glass, with sharp edges and wide-open silence. When she stepped inside for the first time, she didn't feel awe. She felt small. Eric barely acknowledged her presence. He stood tall, handsome in a cold, angular way. He gave her a short glance, then nodded toward his assistant. "She can start tomorrow. Tell her the rules." The assistant, a woman named Lydia, handed Joyce a small printed sheet. "No entering Mr. Eric's office. Meals to be served by 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 7 p.m. sharp. Speak only when spoken to. Discretion is required at all times." Joyce read it carefully, then folded it. "I understand." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." Weeks passed. Joyce never complained. She woke before dawn, scrubbed floors until they shone, washed clothes by hand, and prepared meals with meticulous care. She worked like her life depended on it, because it did. Eric said nothing. He moved through the house like a ghost in tailored suits, always on the phone, always with the door to his office closed. Sometimes, Joyce wondered if he even noticed her, but he did. He noticed how she folded his shirts tighter than Lydia ever. Had he noticed how the kitchen smelled richer, warmer, how the floors gleamed even in low light? And then, one rainy Thursday evening, something changed. Joyce was wiping down the windows in the dining room when Eric walked in. He poured himself a drink, sat at the massive oak table, and said suddenly, "Don't you ever get tired of this?" Joyce turned, startled. "Tired of what, sir?" "Life being the same, every day." She paused. "Sometimes, but it's better than where I came from." Eric stared into his glass. "Where did you come from?" Joyce hesitated. "Let's just say, nowhere that would impress you." He smirked. "Try me." So she told him. Not everything, not the parts that still ached, but enough. Eric listened, really listened, and for the first time, Joyce saw something flicker in his eyes that wasn't arrogance or boredom, it was interest. From that day on, he spoke to her more often. At first, small things, questions about the day, casual observations. Then deeper, personal, reflective. "You're not like the others," he said once, as she served him tea in the evening. "What others? The ones who come near me for money or status. You don't seem to want anything." Joyce shrugged. "I want peace, safety, a reason to stop running." Eric looked away, his expression unreadable. The conversations grew longer, more intimate. He asked about her dreams. She asked why he lived in such a beautiful place but seemed so lonely. "I lost trust in people," he said one night. "Even myself." Joyce didn't say anything. She just placed a plate of food in front of him and sat across the room in silence. Later that evening, he walked into the kitchen and poured a second glass of wine. "For you," he said, handing it to her. Joyce hesitated, then took it. It became a ritual. Night by night, they peeled back layers, until one night, things shifted again. The kiss wasn't planned. Joyce had just finished clearing the dishes. Eric lingered near the doorway, watching her. His tie loosened, eyes softer than usual. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. She turned to respond, but his lips found hers before she could speak. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't rushed. It was something they'd both felt coming, but had been afraid to name. What followed was kept behind locked doors. By day, Joyce worked as usual. By night, she was something else. Not quite a maid, not quite a lover. Something in between. Eric remained distant during the day, professional, guarded. But the nights belonged to them, and for the first time since she had left the orphanage, Joyce felt chosen. Then came the missed cycle, the nausea, the sudden weight of possibility. She bought a test in secret, using money she had saved from cleaning odd jobs outside the house. Positive, Joyce sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the result. Her heart raced with fear and something else, hope. She imagined a new life, her, Eric, and the baby, a family, real. This time, she waited until he returned from work that evening. The house was quiet. Rain tapped gently on the windows. "Eric," she said as he entered the kitchen. He looked tired. "Yes, I need to tell you something," he sighed, setting down his keys. "Can it wait? I've had a long day." "No, it's important." He frowned. "What is it?" Joyce took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was worse than screaming. Eric froze, his face going blank. "What?" "I'm pregnant. It's yours." His voice dropped to a cold, dangerous whisper. "You let this happen." Joyce flinched. I thought you'd want to know. I thought maybe." "You thought wrong," he snapped. "Do you have any idea what this means? My reputation, my business." Joyce's eyes filled with tears. "It's our child." "No," Eric said flatly. "It's yours. I won't be part of this." She stepped forward. "Eric, please." He raised a hand. "You need to leave tonight." Joyce's breath caught in her throat. "Where will I go?" "That's not my problem." She stared at him, searching for the man who used to share wine with her at night. He was gone. Only the cold mask remained. That night, Joyce packed her things. No goodbye, no money offered, just a door that shut behind her. Pregnant, alone. Again, the bus rumbled forward, leaving the city lights and Eric's mansion far behind. Joyce sat near the back, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching a worn cloth bag. Her face was calm, but her chest burned with a fire she hadn't known she carried. Eric had thrown her out. Again, the world had proven it had no place for girls like her. But this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was carrying someone, and she would never let that child feel abandoned like she had. The town where the bus stopped was small, quiet, and foreign. The streets were dusty, the buildings old, and the people curious. Joyce stepped off the bus with nothing but courage and a few coins. ABA had secretly slipped into her pocket the night before. There was no plan, no job, no home, but there was resolve. She found a tiny room in the back of a woman's house, an aging landlady who took pity on her and agreed to let her stay for a week in exchange for sweeping the yard and helping with laundry. Joyce worked like she had in the mansion, scrubbing floors and cooking food for others, collecting small coins, just to survive. Her belly grew heavier. Her back ached from labor. The whispers started soon after. "She's pregnant and alone. No husband. Shame." She heard them all. She ignored every one. One hot afternoon, while carrying firewood through the market square, Joyce stumbled. The load tumbled from her arms, and pain sliced through her stomach. She gasped and leaned against a wall. "Girl, are you mad? You shouldn't be carrying that," a voice called out. A tall, broad-shouldered woman rushed over, her arms full of plantains. Her name was Mama Okua. "Come, come," she said, waving off onlookers. "This child doesn't need your judgment. She needs help." Mama Okua took her home, her real home. A small two-room house filled with herbs, steaming pots, and the smell of charcoal and shea butter. "You'll stay with me until the baby comes," she said matter-of-factly. "I can't pay," Joyce whispered. "I didn't ask for money. You'll help in the market when you're ready." Joyce lowered her head in gratitude. "Thank you." Mama Okua waved her off. "Don't thank me. Just survive." The baby came on a stormy night. Joyce's screams filled the dark room, her hands clutching, the mattress soaked in sweat. The midwife, called in last minute, barked commands while Mama Okua wiped her forehead. "You're strong," she whispered. "You're stronger than you know." After hours of pain and panic, a cry rang out. Loud, healthy. The midwife smiled. "It's a boy." Joyce, sobbing, held the baby against her chest. He was small, warm, and impossibly perfect. "His name?" Mama Okua asked softly. Joyce looked down, her voice cracking. "David." The days that followed were hard. There were no diapers, no crib, no formula. Only boiled cloths, hand-mixed porridge, and lullabies sung by candlelight. Joyce rose before dawn, wrapped David in a sling, and walked to the market. She swept stalls, fetched water, and helped old women carry basketsful with David strapped to her back. The whispers returned. "She's still here. She's working with a baby on her back." Pitiful. Joyce smiled at them. Always, she had work to do. Years passed. David grew into a boy with wide eyes and questions too big for his age. "Mama, why don't I have a papa like the other boys?" Joyce paused. "Because God knew you'd only need one warrior." That answer satisfied him for now. He was clever, too clever. At 5, he could read street signs and count faster than the shopkeepers. At 7, he helped market women calculate change. By 10, he was top of his class, using borrowed books and pencils worn to the stub every day. Joyce walked him to school in a uniform she had sewn by hand from scraps. "Mama, you don't need to come. I'm big now." "I know," she said, smiling, "but I still like seeing you walk through that gate." After school, while others played, David studied. "I'll be somebody one day," he told her, "so you don't have to work anymore." Joyce would nod, holding back tears. She didn't want him to carry that weight, but she also knew he meant it. By the time David turned 16, his name echoed in classrooms and town meetings. "Have you heard about that boy? The one raised by the maid girl? He's going to be something." Joyce heard it too, but she stayed humble. "I just sweep and cook," she'd say. "He's the smart one." But deep down, she glowed. All her sacrifice, all the years of labor and loneliness, they were blooming into something real, something she could touch. Then came the letter, a white envelope with the school's seal. David tore it open in front of her, hands shaking. "Mama," he whispered, eyes wide. "I got it." She frowned. "Got what?" "The scholarship. Full tuition. University in the capital." Joyce stared at him. "You're not joking." He shook his head, laughing, crying, everything at once. Joyce dropped the bowl she was holding and rushed to hug him, her hands trembling. "Oh, David, oh my baby, I told you, you're meant for more." He pulled back, smiling. "And you're coming with me." She chuckled through tears. "Let's take it one step at a time." But that night, as she watched him study by lamplight, Joyce allowed herself something she hadn't in years, a dream, not just of survival, but of a future. The capital felt like a world, stitched from light and speed. Glass towers caught the sun like knives, cars buzzed past without waiting. The university campus was wide and modern, alive with students speaking English, French, sometimes all three at once. David stood on the concrete steps of the admissions hall with a worn backpack and a clean shirt Joyce had ironed twice. His heart thudded not from fear, but from possibility. His mother's sacrifices had brought him here. Now it was up to him. In his first year, David devoured everything. He sat in the front row, asked questions professors didn't expect, stayed up until 2 a.m. reading economics papers most students barely skimmed. He wasn't just hungry, he was starving for change. But it wasn't long before he caught the attention of someone outside the classroom. His name was Anthony Mensah, a guest lecturer and guest judge for a student entrepreneurship challenge. Anthony was a tall man with silver at his temples and a voice that held rooms still. His reputation preceded him, former tech entrepreneur, now investor, mentor, and chairman of multiple foundations. David's presentation during the challenge was clean, ambitious, and unlike anything Anthony had heard all day. When it was over, Anthony walked up to him. "You're David Johnson?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Where are you from?" David told him. "And your parents?" "My mother raised me alone," David replied. "She's everything I've got." Anthony nodded slowly. "Good answer. Come to my office tomorrow. Let's talk about your future." What began as one meeting became many. Anthony introduced David to ideas beyond the syllabus: negotiation tactics, earlier stage investment models, emerging African markets. He even helped David land a summer internship at a startup he backed. But their bond wasn't just academic. One night, after a late mentorship session, Anthony looked at David and said, "You remind me of someone." David tilted his head. "Who?" "My younger self," Anthony said, smiling, "except smarter and more honest." David laughed, but those words stuck with him. When Anthony asked to meet Joyce, David hesitated. He wasn't ashamed, quite the opposite. But something told him this meeting might be more than polite. Curiosity. He was right. Joyce cooked a simple meal for the occasion: banku and okra soup, and wore the nicest dress she owned, one she'd sewn herself. She greeted Anthony with a warm smile and quiet eyes. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Mensah," she said. "Please, call me Anthony," he replied. Throughout dinner, Joyce listened more than she spoke, but Anthony watched her, really watched her. The way she moved, the way she looked at David with pride so deep it softened her entire face. "She's special," Anthony told David later. "I know," David said. "She saved me." Anthony found himself stopping by more often, bringing things Joyce never asked for. Fresh mangoes from his trip, a book he thought she'd like, a radio just in case. She resisted at first. "I've lived my whole life without men giving me things," she said. "And yet," Anthony replied, "you gave everything to your son. Maybe it's time someone gave something back." They began taking walks, simple ones. They talked about life, loss, and dreams delayed. And slowly, Joyce let her guard down. Meanwhile, far across the city, Eric sat in a leather chair in a dark office, surrounded by silence. The company he had spent years building was bleeding money. Bad investments, failed mergers, a market crash he hadn't anticipated. His fiancée had already left, taken the ring, the car, and her socialite smile with her. He poured another drink. Alone, his assistant knocked gently. "Sir, there's a promising investor you might want to meet. Young, smart, just got press for launching a microloan platform for underserved areas." Eric looked up. "What's his name?" "David Johnson." The meeting was set for Thursday, at a sleek rooftop restaurant downtown. Eric arrived early, his nerves dulled by tourists. He was used to meetings with men his age, not boys in university blazers. When David walked in, Eric felt a strange tightening in his chest. The young man looked vaguely familiar, his eyes especially. "Mr. Eric," David greeted, shaking his hand firmly. "David, please, sit." They discussed numbers, funding goals, and scaling plans. David was sharp, confident, clear. Eric, for the first time in months, felt like he was talking to someone who might actually save his company. But something gnawed at him. That name, that face, those eyes. As they wrapped up, David's phone rang. "Sorry, it's my mother," he said, smiling. "She worries if I'm 5 minutes late." Eric chuckled. "That's what mothers do." David stood. "She's nearby, actually. She and her friend are in the restaurant downstairs. We're heading home together." Eric nodded. "Maybe I'll say hello." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. They walked down the stairs and entered the cafe lobby. David scanned the room. "There she is," he said, waving. "Mom." Joyce turned around, and the moment froze. Eric's heart stopped. She was older, yes, but unmistakable. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. "Joyce," gasped. Eric's lips parted. "Joyce." David looked between them. "Want you to know each other." Joyce stepped forward, her voice low. "David, this man, this is your father." The words hit like a punch to the chest. David stumbled back a step. "What?" Eric reached for him. David's voice rose. "You threw her out. You left her while she was pregnant." "David, please," Joyce said gently. Not here. Let's talk at home." But David couldn't breathe. He shook his head and walked out, the door slamming behind him. Joyce and Eric stood in silence. He looked at her with a haunted face. "I didn't know." "You knew enough," she replied. "You just didn't care to ask." That night, David sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. Memories of his mother sacrificing everything. Memories of her laughter, her exhaustion, her strength. And now, this man, the one he had admired from afar in business articles, the same man who had cast her out, the same man whose blood ran through his own veins. Joyce came over quietly. She sat beside him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to carry that pain," she said, "but I knew one day it would come." "I hate him," David whispered. "I don't want to, but I do." "I did too," she admitted. "But hate doesn't build anything, and you're not here because of his rejection. You're here because you never gave up." He looked at her, his eyes glassy. "What do I do?" Joyce smiled sadly. "That's for you to decide." 2 days later, David walked into Eric's office without knocking. Eric stood slowly. "David, don't speak," David said. "I'm going to say this once." Eric nodded, quiet. "You left her, you left me, and I don't care how scared you were. That's not what men do." Eric swallowed hard. "You're right, but," David continued, voice firm, "I've come too far to let your mistakes poison me." Eric blinked. "I don't forgive you," David said. "Not yet, but I'll give you a chance. Not for you, for me. For her." Eric's voice cracked. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," David said, turning to leave. "Earn it." Joyce stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The white lace sleeves hugged her arms gently. Her hair, swept into soft curls, framed a face marked by years but also lit by something rare. Joy. Mama Okwa adjusted the final pin in her dress and stepped back, teary-eyed. "Look at you," she whispered. "You're glowing." Joyce chuckled softly. "It feels unreal." "It is real, and it's time you stopped thinking you weren't allowed to be happy." A knock came at the door. David poked his head in, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look older than his years. "Ready, Mama?" Joyce nodded, taking his arm. More than ever, the ceremony was small but warm. Just close friends, a few neighbors, and the people who had walked with them through the storm. Anthony stood at the altar, his smile wide and unwavering. When Joyce reached him, he took her hands in his. "No speeches," she whispered. "Just a promise," he replied. The vows were simple. No grand declarations, just honesty. "I didn't think I'd ever love again," Joyce said softly, "but you made me feel safe. I didn't think I'd ever meet someone who would ground me," Anthony replied, "but you made me steady." When they kissed, the room erupted in gentle applause and Mama Okua shouted. Finally, David laughed through his tears. After the reception, Joyce and Anthony sat under the stars in their new backyard, a modest home near David's apartment in the city. "I never imagined this," Joyce said, resting her head on Anthony's shoulder. He kissed her forehead. "That's what makes it beautiful." David walked out with 2 plates of leftover cake. "Don't get too romantic. I'm still here." Anthony laughed. "You're always here, and I always will be," David said, handing them the plates. Joyce looked at her son, her miracle, her proof that nothing was wasted. "Go get some rest," she said. "You've earned it." David hesitated. "There's something else I've been thinking about." "What's that?" Joyce asked. "I want to expand the company, but I want to focus more on community investment, microloans, education, something that changes lives, like you changed mine." Anthony sat up straighter. "That's a bold shift." David nodded. "It feels right, like I'm finally building something that lasts." Joyce reached out and squeezed his hand. "Then do it, and do it well." Weeks passed, then months. David's business grew. His reputation blossomed. Investors came knocking, but this time, he was the one setting the terms, and then love found him too. Her name was Lydia, a research analyst, with a laugh that echoed in halls and a mind as sharp as her tongue. They met during a panel event and clashed immediately over a pricing model. He challenged her. She corrected him. They had coffee the next day. A year later, they married under a mango tree in the same town where Joyce had once swept markets with David on her back. Eric didn't attend that wedding, but he sent a letter. It was simple. "David, I know I've missed too many moments already, but if there's space in your life, even a small one, I'd like to fill it. No more excuses. Just action." David folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. It wasn't time yet, but maybe soon. It was the birth of David's first child that cracked the wall open. Joyce held her granddaughter in trembling arms, teeny pink, sleeping. Her name was Amara, meaning grace. Anthony stood behind her, rocking gently, while David hovered close, and then, quietly, Eric entered the hospital room. He stood at the door, unsure if he should cross the threshold. Joyce looked at him. She said nothing, but she didn't stop him. He walked slowly to David. His hand shook as he reached out. David didn't embrace him, but he didn't step away. "This is Amara," David said. "She's your granddaughter." Eric looked down at the bundle. "She's perfect. She has my mother's strength," David said, without smiling. Eric nodded, emotion choking him. "I can see that." Over the next year, Eric began visiting, more often, not to lecture, not to interfere, just to show up. He brought picture books, helped clean toys, sat quietly on park benches watching his grandchildren run. David was cautious, still guarded, but Joyce she watched from a distance with knowing eyes. "People change," she said once to Anthony. "Not because they want to fix the past, but because they finally understand it." One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, David invited Eric over for dinner. He had never done that before. Joyce cooked jollof rice like she used to. Anthony set the table. Lydia prepared salad, humming off-key. The kids ran through the house, their laughter echoing off the walls. Eric arrived with a new book under his arm and nervousness in his eyes. When David opened the door, he smiled, just slightly. "Come in, Dad." Eric froze, just for a second, then stepped inside. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the children were asleep, they sat together, Eric, David, Joyce, and Anthony, talking about nothing and everything. The pain wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled the room. It had been replaced by something quieter. Forgiveness, not the kind that erases, but the kind that coexists. Later, Joyce stood alone on the porch, looking up at the stars. Anthony joined her. "It's strange," she said, "to feel full after so many years of being empty." He took her hand. "You filled others first. Now it's your turn." She smiled, and for the first time, truly believed him. Life, for them all, kept unfolding. David expanded his business into 3 regions. Lydia opened a consulting firm. They had a second child, Noah, who was loud and stubborn like his father. Joyce and Anthony traveled when they could. They started a small foundation for single mothers and helped local schools with supplies and mentorship programs. Eric never tried to rewrite his history, but he wrote new chapters with his grandchildren, and they, in their innocent joy, gave him a kind of redemption no adult ever could. The story didn't end with grand awards or newspaper headlines. It ended in the little things: a dinner shared, a birthday cake, a child's drawing pinned to a refrigerator. Ended with Joyce rocking Amara in her arms, humming a lullaby she had once sung to David in a dusty market room, her eyes closed and heart full. It ended not with revenge, but with something better, a life rebuilt, a love that remained. If you watched until the end, comment the word unbreakable, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends and family.